Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Gaurav Sharma and with me is Aditi Lumba bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairs high-level meeting on Ukraine's issue. New Delhi says around 13,300 Indian nationals returned to India so far from Ukraine's neighbouring countries under Operation Ganga. UN Security Council expresses alarm at prospect of nuclear incident in Ukraine. India reiterates to resolve differences through dialogue. Aeroflot, Russia's flagship carrier, announces that it will halt all international flights except to Belarus from March the 8th. Indian Navy successfully demonstrates accuracy of BrahMos supersonic cruise missile from stealth destroyer INS Chennai. Sri Lanka trailed by 466 runs against India as they score 108 for 4 in their first innings at stumps on day 2 of the Mohali cricket test. And in the ICC Women's World Cup, India to begin their campaign on Sunday against Pakistan at Mount Maunganui.
As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. And now, the news in detail.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a high-level meeting on the Ukraine issue on Saturday evening. The meeting was attended by Union Ministers Dr. S. Jaishankar and Piyush Goyal along with National Security Advisor Ajit Dobhal, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla and other senior officials. Mr. Modi has been continuously holding high-level meetings on the Ukraine crisis since the beginning of the conflict. During the meetings, Mr. Modi has been reviewing the ongoing efforts under Operation Ganga to bring back Indians stranded in Ukraine.
External Affairs Ministry has said that around 13,300 Indian nationals have returned to India so far from Ukraine's neighbouring countries under Operation Ganga. Briefing media in New Delhi, External Affairs Minister spokesperson Arindam Bakshi said that 15 flights have landed in the last 24 hours with around 2,900 passengers on board on Saturday.
During the last 24 hours, 15 flights have landed, around 2,900 Indians on board. So if you add that to the previous numbers, we have approximately 13,300 people who have returned to India on the flights by 63 flights under Operation Ganga. That was as of around midday today. Some more flights, of course, will take off now.
For details, here is a desk report.
Mr. Bagchi informed that under the Operation Ganga, 13 flights are scheduled for the next 24 hours. Of them, one is Indian Air Force C-17 aircraft, which is bound to Budapest. He said almost all Indians have now left Kharkiv city, which is a very positive development, as the area remained a cause of concern for the last few days. Mr. Bagchi said that the main area of focus is now in Sumy of Ukraine, and India is in touch with all concerned regarding the possible movements of the students, and the best option for it would be a ceasefire.
Main focus is now on Sumy. This is a little in the northeast on the border with Russia. Now here, of course, this has been in the news a lot and we are exploring multiple options for evacuating our students out of there. But let me reiterate, the main challenge remains the ongoing shelling there, ongoing violence there, and the lack of transportation primarily. But even more the transportation, I think it's a problem of having a secure and safe way to get them out while they're not under threat. We are in touch with all concerned regarding possible movement. The best option for us would be a ceasefire, of course. That allows to get our students out. And in this connection, we have been strongly pressing both the Russian and the Ukrainian sides to allow this kind of a local ceasefire, perhaps just to get a corridor for our students. It's not yet happened, but we are continuing to push for that.
He said for this, India has been strongly pressing Russian and Ukrainian sides to allow this kind of local ceasefire to create a safe corridor for Indian students. Manoj Singh Rana for World News, All India Radio.
Meanwhile, the Indian Embassy in Ukraine has said that it is reaching out to 298 Indian students in Pesochin. In a tweet, the embassy said buses are en route and expected to arrive soon. It urged students to follow all safety instructions and precautions. The embassy asked them to be safe and strong.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Operation Ganga and developments in Ukraine. We're joined by Ashok Sajjanhar, a former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, a journalist.
Today we are discussing Operation Ganga, which the government of India has undertaken to evacuate and bring home safely its Indian citizens who have been stuck in Ukraine in view of the ongoing war between Ukraine and the Russian troops. Ambassador Sajjanhar, when we see the Operation Ganga, which is ongoing, which is in process even as we speak, and we see this mammoth effort which is being put by the government to get its citizens home, how do you assess the entire situation given the fact that we have to get citizens out of a war situation, how difficult this is, and despite that fact, this is an operation that has seen a lot of success so far. We've had a lot of Indians who've safely made their way home. How do you see this entire scenario?
You're very right, Simran, when you say that it is a mammoth task. It is, and it came all of a sudden because I don't think anyone really expected, no one in the world expected. The world was stunned when this attack took place. Of course, the repatriation, the evacuation of our students had started before that because the attack by Russia on Ukraine happened on the morning of 24th of February, while the first chartered flight to bring our students back had already come back on the 22nd. That having been said, it was thought that we had about 20,000 Indian nationals and Indian students. And before the war started, all of them, I think whether they were in the east of the country or they were in the west or central part, first of all, we have to recognize that Ukraine is a very large country. In fact, it is the largest country in Europe. It is bigger than Germany, bigger than France, bigger than Italy. It is about 600,000 square kilometers. It is only next to Russia as far as Europe is concerned. So our students are based in different parts of the country, in the east, west, north, south, everywhere. So before the war started, the advisory was issued on the 15th of February that those who want to go back, they should go back. But I think the students were, of course, worried and concerned that they would be missing out on their studies. And I think the universities and institutes had also advised them that if they leave, there would be no possibility of holding online classes and they should attend offline classes. There were many students who were in fifth grade in the final year and they were keen that they should be able to take their exams. So I think all these concerns were there, and that is why many of the students themselves decided that even when the advisory was issued, that they would not come back. At that time, the commercial flights were also available. But after the war started, this Operation Ganga has been led from the front by the Prime Minister. Within a span of about 2 days, he took more than 4 high-level cabinet meetings in which all the senior ministers were present. And then we have been getting all our students back through the neighboring countries, through Poland, through Slovak Republic, Hungary, Romania, and more recently, even Moldavia has also been included in this list. So till yesterday, I think there were about 48 flights that had come from these countries. In addition to that, we had put into operation, we had marshaled also the C-17 Globemaster aircrafts from the Indian Air Force. And I think by yesterday, there were about more than 10,800 of our nationals who had already come back. And during the course of the day today, I think 16 more flights have come in. So more than about 14,000 of our nationals are already back in India. And I think there are about 8,000 of our students who are waiting on the borders of Ukraine in all these 4 countries that I have said. And the process to bring them also back is going on. The government has designated 4 senior ministers who have gone to these 4 countries to coordinate and to facilitate the arrival and departure of these special aircrafts. And that is helping this whole process a great deal. So it is expected and hope that within the next few days, 1 or 2 days, I think most of our students and nationals from Ukraine will be back. However, it is the commitment of the government that up to the time that the last citizen of India is not evacuated, Operation Ganga will continue.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, as you explained the complexities that are involved in Operation Ganga and in bringing the Indian citizens home and how the government is making every effort to do so, how do you see the fact that there is, of course, an intense current of geopolitics also being played out? And we've seen that the evacuation which is also happening from neighboring countries like Poland, Romania. How do you see, one, the fact that India has always had excellent ties with Russia, with Ukraine, and with other countries like Poland? Do you see the fact that the diplomacy has always worked and the bilateral ties have always been excellent? Do you think that has gone a long way also in making Operation Ganga a success?
Yes, you are right, Simran, that India has, with Russia, of course, it is a time-tested partnership. It is an excellent relationship, historical relations ever since the independence of India. We have had very good relations, very strong in every field, whether it is strategic, whether it is political, or it is defense, nuclear energy, in every arena, space, we have had excellent relations. So that when the war started, Prime Minister Modi was immediately able to, on the same day in the evening, he was able to speak to President Putin. And of course, he urged that there should be a cessation of hostilities, that Russia should come back to the path of diplomacy and dialogue. But the second part of his conversation was the highest priority that India placed on getting its students, its nationals back safely and quickly from Ukraine. And this was mentioned to President Putin. It was also mentioned this was underlined and emphasized when Prime Minister Modi spoke to his Ukrainian counterpart, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, on the 26th, 2 days after that. And of course, Prime Minister Modi said that we would be willing to extend any possible help in terms of stopping the war and bringing the violence to an end. But he also mentioned about the repatriation of Indian students from there. India has excellent relations with Ukraine also. And in fact, Prime Minister Modi had met Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of COP26 meeting in Glasgow last year in November. So just a few months ago, the two leaders had met there. And Prime Minister has spoken also to his counterpart in Romania, to his counterpart of the Slovak Republic, and also to the President of Poland, basically to thank them for all the assistance that they have extended to the repatriation of the Indian students, and also expressing this support would continue. So I think this is going very well, except now that the challenge is that there are a few places like Sumy, where we have a number of our students, I think in the range of about 400, 500. And that is right in the middle of the conflict zone. And how to get them from there either to the west of Ukraine, where all the neighboring countries are and from where all the flights are taking off, or even to arrange to take them to the Russian border, which is just about a few from Sumy. I think it would be very close, about 60 kilometers or 100 kilometers, and from Russia evacuate them. But I think the logistical arrangements on that are still being made. India is in very direct contact with the Russian authorities. As I mentioned, Prime Minister himself has spoken to President Putin twice on this score. Once we were able to get a green corridor, a peace corridor, and an evacuation from Kharkiv to some of the neighboring towns and neighboring villages where all our students were able to move. But I think the challenge now is to get the students out of Sumy. And I think a few students who are still based in Kiev. But the government is focused on that, looking very closely at that. And I am confident that within the next few days, we would be able to get all of them out of these war zones also.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on Operation Ganga as the Indian government steps up its efforts to get every citizen back home. And with these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
The United Nations Security Council members expressed alarm at the prospect of a nuclear incident in Ukraine at an emergency meeting on Friday. The meeting convened hours after a training building at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant caught fire as Russians moved in on the facility and seized control of it. The International Atomic Energy Agency chief told the council that no reactors had been damaged. During his remarks, India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti, reiterated India's position calling for a resolution of differences through dialogue and respect for the UN Charter and sovereignty of nations.
An immediate cessation of violence and end to all hostilities are essential. We continue to carefully follow the developments regarding the safety and security of Ukraine's nuclear power reactors and facilities. India attaches the highest importance to ensuring safety and security of nuclear facilities, as any accident involving the nuclear facilities may have severe consequences for public health and the environment. India accords the highest priority to the discharge by the IAEA of its safeguards and monitoring activities in accordance with its statute in an effective, non-discriminatory and efficient manner.
Meanwhile, the UNSC will also meet on Monday to discuss the humanitarian situation in Ukraine. The French and Mexican missions to the UN are seeking the Council's approval for a resolution calling for unhindered humanitarian access in Ukraine.
The Ukrainian President's office said civilian evacuations have been halted in an area of the country where Russia defense officials had announced a ceasefire. Kyrylo Tymoshenko, the deputy head of President Volodymyr Zelensky's office, said that the evacuation effort was stopped because the city of Mariupol remained under fire on Saturday. The Russian Defense Ministry said earlier in a statement it had agreed on evacuation routes with Ukrainian forces for Mariupol, a strategic port in the southeast, and for the eastern city of Volnovakha. The Russian military initiated a temporary ceasefire in two areas of Ukraine to allow civilians to evacuate, Russian state media reported on Saturday. The Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement it had agreed on evacuation routes with Ukrainian forces for the strategic port of Mariupol in the southeast and the eastern city of Volnovakha. Mariupol had become the scene of growing misery amid days of shelling that knocked out most phone service and raised the prospect of food and water shortages. The head of Ukraine's Security Council, Alexei Danilov, had urged Russia to create humanitarian corridors to allow children, women and the older adults to flee the war. As Russian forces batter strategic locations elsewhere, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has lashed out at NATO for refusing to impose a no-fly zone over his country and warned that all the people who get killed from this day onwards die also because of NATO. But NATO said a no-fly zone could provoke widespread war in Europe with nuclear-armed Russia.
Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Saturday to discuss the Ukraine crisis, his spokesperson said. Israel has reportedly offered to mediate in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, though officials have previously played down expectations of a breakthrough. Aeroflot, Russia's flagship carrier, has announced that it will halt all international flights except to Belarus from March the 8th. The move by Russia's biggest state-owned airline comes after the country's aviation agency, Rosaviatsia, recommended that all Russian airlines with foreign-leased planes halt both passenger and cargo flights abroad. It cited a higher risk of foreign leased planes being impounded as part of Western sanctions that ban leasing of planes to Russia. Rosaviatsia's recommendation doesn't apply to Russian airlines that use Russian planes or foreign planes that aren't at risk of being impounded. It also doesn't apply to foreign airlines from countries that have not imposed sanctions on Russia and have not shut down their airspace for Russian planes. Aeroflot's statement cited circumstances that hinder operating flights as a reason for its move. Aeroflot said it would cancel return tickets for passengers who are scheduled to depart to Russia after March the 6th and travel back after March the 8th. Those with one-way tickets will be allowed to fly up until March the 8th. Earlier this week, S7, Russia's biggest private airline, announced that it was halting all international flights starting Saturday.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is scheduled to visit southeastern Poland near the border with Ukraine on Saturday to meet with refugees even as the war entered its 10th day. Blinken arrived in Rzeszów on Saturday for talks with top Polish officials. Blinken was meeting Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau a day after attending a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Brussels. The NATO alliance pledged to step up support for eastern flank members like Poland to counter Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Although NATO has ruled out establishing a no-fly zone over non-member Ukraine, it has significantly boosted both military and humanitarian assistance.
The Indian Navy successfully demonstrated the accuracy of an extended-range land attack BrahMos supersonic cruise missile from the stealth destroyer INS Chennai on Saturday. The missile hit its intended target with pinpoint accuracy after traversing an extended-range trajectory and performing complex maneuvers. This achievement establishes the Indian Navy's ability to strike even deeper and influence land operations further away from the sea when and where required. Both BrahMos missile and INS Chennai are indigenously built and highlight the cutting edge of the Indian missile and shipbuilding prowess. They reinforce the Indian Navy's contribution towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India endeavours.
In the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup, India will begin their campaign on Sunday when they take on arch rival Pakistan to Mount Manganui. South Africa defeated Bangladesh by 32 runs at University Oval in Dunedin in the first match of the day on Saturday. In the other match of the day, Australia defeated England by 12 runs at Hamilton.
In men's cricket, Sri Lanka were 108 for 4 when stumps were drawn on day 2 of the first test against India in Mohali. Sri Lanka are still trailing by 466 runs with 6 wickets in hand. For India, Ravichandran Ashwin took 2 wickets. Jasprit Bumrah and Ravindra Jadeja shared 1 wicket each. The hosts declared their first innings at 574 for 8. Indian innings was powered by 175 not out by Ravindra Jadeja. Rishabh Pant scored 96, while Ashwin also made a superb 61.
Hockey India has announced a list of 33 players, each for India A, men's and women's probable group. Former Indian men's hockey team captain Sardar Singh has been named as a coach of the Indian A men's side. Former Indian men's hockey team forward and two-time Olympian Deepak Thakur has been named as a coach of the India A women's team. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let us take a look at the press reports on China. Prasar Bharati Beijing reports that the new Indian ambassador to China has arrived in Beijing and is undergoing mandatory COVID quarantine. AFP reports China sets lowest GDP target in decades over grave outlook. Forbes writes China sets slowest GDP growth target in more than 30 years as challenges mount. Reuters reports that China will continue its crackdown on monopolies to ensure fair competition. It quoted Premier Li Qiang citing a report released ahead of the start of the annual session of the parliament on Saturday. Foreign policy headline reads, Putin's Ukraine war is Xi's worst nightmare. Beijing is watching closely. Al Jazeera headline reads, China-led development bank halts business in Russia, Belarus. It adds that the move is latest sign of the limits of Beijing's support for Moscow as it faces sanctions and censure over war in Ukraine. The Times of India reports that with an eye on China, Indian Army has mounted airborne insertion exercise in Siliguri corridor. CNBC writes that China will raise defence spending by 7.1% in 2022, faster than last year. That's the fastest pace since 2019, when defence spending grew by 7.5%.
And now let us take a look at what made the headlines in Nepal. Khabar Hub reports that Nepali Congress NC General Secretary Gagan Kumar Thapa has said the politics of provocation is harmful for the country and the society. The Himalayan Times reports that the chairperson of CPN Maoist Centre, Pushp Kamal Dahal, defended his decision to support parliamentary ratification of the Millennium Challenge Corporation deal at the party's Central Committee meeting. The Kathmandu Post writes that the next meeting of the House of Representatives is scheduled for Sunday, and the main opposition CPN-UML has vowed to continue obstructions. The Himalayan Times writes that the Embassy of Nepal in Germany has issued an advisory to all the Nepali nationals living in Ukraine, saying their safety and safe passage to less risky areas of the western and southern territories is its first priority. Kathmandu Post reports that all COVID-19 related restrictions in the Kathmandu Valley have been lifted effective Saturday, following a large drop in coronavirus cases, officials said on Friday. The Kathmandu Post writes that while Nepalis are being pummeled by all-time high gasoline prices and soaring inflation, filling stations are seeing it as an opportune time to demand a bigger cut. The Himmat Times reports that the Supreme Court has formed a constitutional bench and started hearing by it from today.
Let us have some brief news from Bangladesh. Agriculture Minister and Awami League Presidium member Dr. Abdul Razak on Saturday said the government is strictly monitoring the international market as they are trying to import edible oil to meet the domestic market demand, reports Dhaka Tribune. He said the price of edible oil has gone up sharply in the international market. Edible oil prices in Bangladesh have increased sharply in Bangladesh recently. Bangladesh's first elevated electric metro rail system in the capital city Dhaka will have elevators, escalators and stairs on both sides of each station for providing better facilities to passengers, reports BSS. Once operational, the metro rail will be able to transport 60,000 people per hour and reduce travel time substantially. The 20 kilometers long metro rail system is being built in Dhaka with Japanese funding. Maritime ports at Chattogram, Cox's Bazar, Mongla and Paira in Bangladesh have been asked to remain vigilant in view of the depression over the Southwest Bay and adjoining areas moving northwestwards and intensifying into a deep depression. The depression is likely to intensify further and move in a northwesterly direction, reports UNB. At least 25 people, including a member of police, were injured in clashes between the supporters of Jubu League, the youth wing of the ruling Awami League, and BNP in Dumki Upazila of Patukhali this morning, reports Daily Star.
Officers from 8 foreign nations passed out from INS Dronacharya on successful completion of the gunnery specialization course at an impressive passing out parade held at the Indian Navy's premier gunnery and missile training establishment in Kochi. 17 officers from Bangladesh, Cameroon, Ghana, Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria, Sri Lanka and Tanzania completed the 8-month-long gunnery specialization course. And before we end the bulletin, a quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairs high-level meeting on Ukraine issue. New Delhi says around 13,300 Indian nationals returned to India so far from Ukraine's neighbouring countries under Operation Ganga. UN Security Council expresses alarm at prospect of nuclear incident in Ukraine. India reiterates to resolve differences through dialogue. Aeroflot, Russia's flagship carrier, announces that it will halt all international flights except to Belarus from March the 8th. Indian Navy successfully demonstrates accuracy of BrahMos supersonic cruise missile from stealth destroyer INS Chennai. Sri Lanka trailed by 466 runs against India as they score 108 for 4 in their first innings at stumps on day 2 of the Mohali cricket test. And in the ICC Women's World Cup, India to begin their campaign on Sunday against Pakistan at Mount Maunganui.
And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite bhajan, Vaishnav by artists from Brunei on their Independence Day.
Para
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.